Welcome back. Let's write our first tests. Now, we're going to just have a simple function that we run in this program. We'll create in our main.py file let's make this a little bit bigger. We'll say that we have a function called do stuff. Yes, very descriptive function. Now, in here, we'll just say that we accept a number and we'll just simply return num plus 5. A very, very simple function. So let's say this was our code that builds our app. So this is just one function, but hypothetically we have many functions that we want to test because these are actions that we're going to perform in our code. So the way unit test works is like this. We have our test file, and after we import our unit test, we want to import, the file that we want to test. In our case, it's main.py. So let's just import main, which is right here. Or we can just import the function as well if we want. But in our case, hypothetically, we have many functions here, so we can just import main and use all the functions available there. Now, the way Unittest works is we create a class and then name it whatever we want. In here, we'll have all our tests. So let's just call it test main. And we inherit inside of this class what Unittest gives us, which is a test case. So this is just a standard way to work with Unittest. So we're inheriting whatever Unittest test case is, and now we have that functionality available in our test main class. Now in here, we can start testing and writing code to test. So how can we test main do stuff function? Well, we simply say, hey, let's write a function in here or a method because this is part of a class and say, hey, I want to test do stuff. And in here, it will receive self. Now in here, I can test my code. So I can say if number in here is equals to 10, I'm just giving it a random number, then I'm going to say result is going to equal main.doStuff. So remember, doStuff comes from main, which is the function that we want to test. So I want to run the doStuff function, and in here, give the parameter num, which I've just given here. Or let's just call this test param. So this test param, we're going to run the code, and we're going to get a result. And this last line is the key part of Unittest. Unittest allows us to say self.assert equal. And assert equal is something that we get when we inherit from Unittest. And assert equal says, hey, assert or make sure that these two parameters are equal. In our case, I want to test that the result is equal to, in our case, 10 plus 5 should equal 15. All right. Now, finally, in here, we just run the unit test. And the way we run the unit test, because this is just one test that I did, I could have done multiple tests. All we need to say is unittest.main, which will run the entire test file within the test main. Now, if I run this now, all I have to do is say Python 3 in my command line and say test.py. And I get, okay, ran one test in, super fast, in 0 seconds. That was nice and quick. Now, let's say I do something else where I assert equal that this equals 10. If I run this, look at that. I get a fail. What failed? Well, the test to do function failed on line 8. So that is right here. We have an assertion error, We got 15, but we expected 10. How cool is that? So I now have one failure, so I need to fix my code. So something's not right here. Now, in my case, this is because I've asserted the answer to be 15. But what if we create another test in here and check, hey, what if we have test do stuff 2, and this time the test param is actually going to be a piece of string. So what do we want the function to do? Well, in our case, maybe it gives us a error, maybe a value error. So I'll just say value error, because this shouldn't work. If I run this now, let's clear this. If I run this now, all right, I have 2 tests, but I have 1 error. And I see here that I'm getting an error saying that, hey, I'm getting a type error. Can only concatenate string, not int. Now, in this case, what actually fails is the test file, because what we've just done actually fails our function. But right away, I see that, all right, well, this is something that we need to fix. So I can go back to main and say, hey, I want to make sure that we catch any errors, like type errors or value errors. So the first thing I can do is just say int number. And if I save that to make sure that we convert something to an integer, and I run this, all right, now I get a value error, invalid literal. So int can't be run on this piece of string. Okay, so another thing we can do to improve our code is to wrap it in a try except block, right? And then we can catch, so let's say except, and in here, accept a value error. And let's say as error. And in here, we can do whatever we want. So we can return, if we want, the error, or we can even raise the error. In our case, let's just return the error. And I'll show you why in a second. Now, if I ran this, you see that my test fails, but now it's actually an assertion error. The assertion error is coming from our test file over here. And I'm asserting that, hey, I want to make sure that the result and the value error are equal. Now, you see over here that there's a bit of a mismatch. We have a value error over here doesn't equal the class value error. Now, this is a bit of a trick where because we're returning an error, it's actually an instance of the value error class. So we need to do something like this. We need to say, hey, is instance, and say, what is it an instance of? Well, is result an instance of value error, like this. But the problem here is that, let's make this a little bit bigger. The problem here is that assert equals is going to expect 2 parameters, 2 things that must be equal. But here, I just want to make sure that this returns true, that the result is an instance of value error. So how can I do that? Well, besides assert equal, we have a few other methods that Unittest gives us. If I go to the Unittest documentation here, on the first line it says the list of assert methods. So here, I see that these are all the methods for asserting and testing our code. The one that we probably want is this one, assert true, to check if something is true. So if I do assert that this is true, and I ran my test, let's clear this, and run my test again. There you go. I ran 2 tests and everything seems to be okay. And again, to go over this, why is this? Well, I'm running my test file, and then I'm going to run the test, do stuff, which is going to be okay. Then I do the second part, where the test parameter is something that we don't really want, which is just a piece of string. The result is going to give us a value error because we've caught this error and we're now returning the error. And then finally, we run this piece of code. Hey, is this true? Is the result going to be a value error? So you see what we're doing here. What we're trying to do with our tests is to improve our function by simply trying to break it. So we want to break our function and see, hey, can I trick this function into giving me an error? And then once you do that and a test fails, then you go back to the function and try to fix it, kind of like we did here, which is really, really cool. This is a common practice with testing where you try and break things until, well, the function becomes perfect. Now, I want you to take your time here and see if you can break this function and maybe add a couple more tests. In the next video, I'm going to add a few more to make this function even better. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.